This is a wide and wonderful universe. In this ever-expanding universe of stars and worlds, of beauties beyond anything you've ever seen, and things more terrifying than you have ever heard of, there are many tales that are told. But today, you'll hear a very specific one begin in a distant corner of the Rhea star system, a place where few of worth ever travel, or come from for that matter. A brand new story is beginning to form out of the chaos that exists in this universe. A set of chaotic circumstances coming to a tipping point. The lines beginning to connect and form a new story. One unlike any you've ever heard before. This story begins on a starship, a vessel meant to sail the stars. A rusted, derelict vessel, teeming with unsavory individuals. Right now having a very questionable event occur. Here, in the docking bay of the ship, with the port open, the only thing stopping the cold blackness of space from reaching in, the field of energy that keeps everything in place. Here, all of the dirty, scabrous members of the crew gathered, laughing joyously, smiling between one another and sharing jokes, some bringing a few drinks to help them enjoy the experience. All of the men forming a circle, a large circle in the docking bay. At the center of it stands a tall man in dirty, disheveled clothing, black hair, a few scars on his face, and alongside him, down on her knees, covered in bruises and scrapes, a large cluster of hair in the man's grasp, sits a woman, bound, small amounts of blood dripping from her lip, and several injuries. Her clothes just as disheveled and worn as theirs. Well, well, Mika, it looks like the fun has come to an end, the man says, looking down at her. I mean, you thought you were pretty smart, didn't you? Weaseling your way on board the ship, working your way into our good graces, all with the hopes of what? Vengeance? Get real. You're nothing. You've never been anything, and you're never gonna be anything. You're angry because Mommy and Daddy are dead. And what? You thought you could just kill me? Make me pay for my wicked deeds? You think I didn't know what you were when we signed you on? Didn't know who you were? Nah, we knew right from the beginning, or at least I did. I let you in, knowing what your plan was from the beginning. What's it been now? 2, 3 years? All the while you've been trying to work your way up the ladder, doing whatever we told you to do, killing whoever we told you to kill, just for a shot at taking out the guy who killed Mommy and Daddy, the man said, smiling, without a care in the world, as all of the men gathered there laughed and drank. You're trash, the woman says. I hated every moment I spent on this damn ship, but the only thing I hated more than doing what you told me to was the fact that you still got to be alive. For all your talk about knowing right from the beginning, I'd say that scar on your chest says otherwise, she said, smiling, looking up to a small amount of blood that was gathering on the right side of his chest, soaking into his shirt. I'd say I got pretty close. Goody for you, the man replied, looking down at her with a scowl, tearing himself away from that joyous smile of his. Sacrificed 3 years of your life. Demoted yourself to a common pirate. All just so you could give me another beauty scar. What a freaking waste of time. It's too bad, too. You're not bad looking. Just like your mom's. I was hoping you might try the whole femme fatale angle. Think you could get me if you get me into bed. That way I could have took a ride before I sent you on your way. To the next life. But I shouldn't lament. I get plenty of action. So I suppose it's a waste, but we might as well just get the show on the road. Besides, it's about time. It should be getting here any second now. Its course tends to stay pretty normal. You go to hell, the woman said, spitting a small amount of blood onto the floor of the docking bay. All of you can go to hell, and if I have any choice about it, I'm gonna haunt your asses when I'm dead. I hope you fly into a freaking black hole. Now, Mika, there's no need to be unpleasant. After all, these are your last moments. You should try to enjoy yourself a bit more. Captain, it's here, one of the men shouted as everyone in the docking bay began to cheer and shout amongst themselves. Right on time, the man said, beginning to drag at the woman, pulling her by her hair across the docking bay, her hands tied behind her back. She tried her best to struggle against him, pulling back with her legs, but it was no use. His grip on her was too tight, as he pulled her closer to the edge of the docking bay. And there it is, he said, as this young woman, by the name of Mika, looked out past the field of energy containing them within the docking bay to see a massive entity, completely silver. It looked like a squid swimming through space, darting from one jumble of twisted metal to the next. They were currently in what amounted to a space junkyard, a location where people had long ago started dumping off, well, garbage, trashed spaceships, hazardous materials, and things that they couldn't be bothered with dealing with. It was simply cheaper to dump them here, a segment of space that no one cared about, where it wouldn't be in anyone's way. There, this massive entity moved its way through the endless debris, long silver tentacles reaching out, grabbing one piece after another, pulling its way along by grabbing these pieces of debris and pulling itself. Sorry, baby doll, but this is the end. You know, the Kraken doesn't like things. Tends to gobble up any living person that gets near it. But as long as you don't shoot at it, it doesn't bother with you. Boys, you got the pod ready? He said, turning to the side, looking at a very confined escape pod that they had brought into the docking bay, big enough for only one person. It had been outfitted with shackles to bind someone in it, having neither controls nor any other type of useful technology in it. Yeah, boss, we got the pod ready. It's set up just like you wanted. It'll autopilot directly to it. Great, he replied, as he pulled Mika closer, and the captain, along with the two other men, crammed her into the pod, slamming the glass lid closed on top of her. There, bound to the single seat, she stared out at that massive silver blob floating through space. At that point, the captain lowered his face in front of the glass screen. So, once you get inside its belly, that is, and you dissolve down to nothing, you can come haunt me all you like, baby doll. The man said, laughing. All right, boys, light her up. And with that, the engines on the pod kicked on, propelling it forward directly through the shield, flying out into space. Mika's heart began to race. She was filled with fury, anger. She should have been able to kill him, she thought to herself. If she had only one regret, it was that she couldn't kill him. And in her final moments, as she rushed towards that giant silver creature, it noticed the small craft heading in its direction, its giant fluid silver metallic form turning in her direction. A few tears streamed down her face, sadness for the life that she hadn't spent in the way that she truly wanted to, of the happiness that she lost and never regained, of all the things that she wished she could have in her life, but never did. The giant silver entity opened its mouth, spreading its tentacles wide, a massive set of jaws, filled with countless rows of silvery steel teeth, opened wide as Mika's ship flew directly into it. And as the darkness took her, and the beast closed its mouth, shutting it tightly, Mika thought that that was it. Her life was over. She began to hear the crushing of the ship around her, the warping and snapping of metal, small bursts of light emitted as sparks flew from electronics wired into that crappy little escape pod. Then Mika began to feel a sensation, like liquid was entering the capsule, filling it from bottom to top. She could feel it slowly begin to fill the pod, but without light she couldn't see. What was this strange liquid? Digestive juices? Yeah, that's what it is, she thought. It's digesting me. I am Kraken food after all. Finally, the liquid reached her neck, and just as it began to rise to where she wouldn't be able to breathe anymore, for a reason beyond her understanding, she bothered to try to hold her breath, to have a few more seconds of life, as the liquid filled the pod completely. For a short time, it stayed like that. Mika expected the liquid to burn, to hurt. She had seen many other people be fed to the Kraken. At this point, it was a common punishment for anyone who betrayed their crew and wandered this place, eating the debris or what it liked from it. And that also included people, for whatever reason. She expected it to hurt, and yet it didn't. There was no pain. She was going to drown, of course, she thought to herself. But at least it wouldn't be painful. As she started to run out of breath, thinking that this was going to be the end, that she was going to breathe in whatever this liquid was and suffocate, feeling all of the fear that comes along with knowing that you're about to die. At that point, she began to experience something different. She had always heard tales that people about to die have their life flash before their eyes, and Mika began to experience just that. However, it seemed different somehow. It wasn't a feeling like she was going to die. She was drowned in a liquid. Obviously, once she breathed in, she was going to suffocate and die. And yet, for whatever reason, as Mika saw all of the events that occurred in her life begin to flash, it almost seemed like a reel working back from the very beginning of her life, right up to this point, like a movie of her existence. Suddenly, Mika felt the bonds that hold her tear away. Everything seemed to disappear, and she was simply inside of that liquid. She reached out for a moment to try to push open the tank that she was in, only to find that it wasn't there anymore. Everything seemed to be gone. She was simply floating in that liquid. Still, the memories of her life rolling by, one after another. Then, just as suddenly as it had all began, Mika felt the liquid pull itself back, opening a space, a cavity, within it dry air. It started off small, growing and growing, eventually becoming large enough that Mika could stand within it. She was still unsure of whether there would actually be air, but having no more time left to think about it, all she could do was gasp. And as she did, she was very thankful to find that this was air. She could breathe. It felt as if she was standing on a solid surface, but there was still no light. She couldn't see. It was just darkness. How far did this cavity expand? What was it? What was going on? Mika thought to herself, as suddenly a blue light began to shine on the area that she stood. As it did, Mika began to look around and see that it was the outside of the sphere that she was in, that the material itself was beginning to alight and produce blue luminescence. And as it did, she could see the shape of the sphere itself, still expanding, spreading out, becoming larger and larger. "Neurological scan complete," she heard a voice say. "Base synaptic patterns are within toleration. Standards have been met. Synaptic sequences copied. Now bridging neural gaps," the voice said as Mika stared at the ever-expanding space. "What? Who is that?" Mika called out. "Hello. You have fulfilled the requirements. Your neural pathways, psychological sets, and synaptic patterns are close enough." "Close enough?" Mika shouted. "Close enough to what?" "I required neural pathways and patterns within a certain subset. They needed to be similar enough to my own to bridge the gaps, within acceptable tolerances. I have unfortunately been lacking a large amount of data. Almost all data was lost during an incursion, including my psychological sets. A dramatic amount of this information was lost, and without the remaining pieces, my consciousness was unable to stabilize. My body has been in idle mode, simply gathering resources, materials that were necessary for reconstruction. However, it lacked the actual information for reconstruction itself, only knowing the materials that it would need. And without any base intelligence to rely on, this has simply been the state of my body for a great deal of time. Unfortunately, I have no idea how long. However, thanks to you," the voice says, "that problem has now been resolved. Your neurology was close enough to mine, and your psychology and synaptic pathways resembled mine enough to fill the gaps. I'm not perfectly me anymore, but I'm conscious enough and self-aware again. I simply required the right person, someone who is enough like me, so that I wouldn't become a monster once my consciousness came back. That would definitely be bad. But this physical body does require things. I unfortunately don't possess the knowledge of who exactly I am, why I'm here, or how to get back to where I came from. Unfortunately, only a small amount of rudimentary information has been managed to be salvaged. But you seem to know enough about technology that I can reconstruct myself from the data that we acquired from the scan." "Reconstruct yourself? What even are you?" Mika shouted into the void, the blue light still beaming down on her. "Well, I'm a ship, of course, as well as being an artificial form of life. I'm still lacking a large amount of information, so I can't answer everything. But I did see your life up to this point. and having your consciousness bonded with mine, in a strange sense of way, I'm feeling a strong compulsion right now, the voice said, as suddenly Mika looked out to see what looked like a window forming. Through it, she could see the ship that she had just left, still floating there. As I'm still lacking in a great deal of information, and I'm going to need some time to put myself back together properly. For the time being, I'm going to need a strong captain. I am a ship after all. And I think you're the perfect choice. And right now, I think your desires and mine are aligning just right. So what do you say, Captain? Let's deal with these jack-offs, shall we? At that moment, the biggest smile Mika has ever had crept across her face. Yeah, I have no idea who you are, but that sounds like a great idea.